you. Now I'd like to introduce Luis Marquez, who's going to talk about thinking outside of the cat trap. Luis is originally from Colombia, but he's lived for many years in Australia. He has an extensive background working with shelters in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, and consulting in Latino America. Some projects like Animate looked at matching pets and their adopters. Every animal and person comes to an animal shelter with a story behind them. This information is a way of understanding their past and building a better future. Luis is a professional assistance dog trainer and animal handler with experience in dog training for disability, occupational, and therapy programs. I think I'm just going to move this for you now. So,
that's okay.
You want it?
Yeah,
You're okay?
Don't worry about it. Fine.
Excellent.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. As you may notice, English is not my first language, so my English is not very good looking. But look, I'm very excited to be here today, and I think I just want to start this presentation to tell you what basically are the objectives. It's very clear for me that I want to bring the opportunity for all of us to discuss different ideas. I think I have been now aware how important is innovation in terms of developing strategies and ideas. My background is animal welfare since probably 2010 when I started my career in welfare. For the last year, I have been working in the private sector with a multinational, and that experience, both experiences give me two important approaches. Number one is the approach of welfare and try to identify several issues that we have in the industry. Number two, in terms of the commercial side and the private sector, give me the opportunity to understand how important innovation is in terms of finding solutions. So very important, what I try to communicate today is just an idea. I'm not here coming to sell you absolutely anything. I think it's just the opportunity to put an idea outside and see how can we just work together and make sure that we are all compromised with developing different ideas. Another important point that I would like to discuss is I'm not an IT, but I have been very close to technology in terms of the pet industry. And I'm happy, to put this idea outside, but I'm not going to be able to discuss some specifics about the technical because it's just an idea that is underdeveloped. Very important as well, I just want to make sure that I put this in context. I'm going to talk about cats that they are owned by community or by people. And pretty much the reason of this is that during my time managing shelters with a high level of intake, and we are talking about a 7,000 intake on these shelters that they are council-based, is that one of my main compromise and objectives, it was to increase the reclaim rate. I think it was very positive for me to leave my previous role with a shelter that arrived with a 1% reclaim rate for cats to a 15% reclaim rate for cats. And pretty much, I think the reason of this is trying to put innovation and try to put crazy ideas outside that really pushed me to this result. Now, in terms of those results, it came from a very important element in this presentation, which is in terms of what we develop for pets, is that most of the times in the welfare we think about animals, and we forget how important it is to think about how the behavior of cat owners is presented for services and products. Saying this, in terms of this idea, which is Cat Passport, it just tries to put out there how important for local government agencies to think that registration sometimes it just become a roadblock for people to reclaim cats. How fantastic was the information from the previous speakers to give a big support about cats that they are found very close to home. And from my experience working in welfare is that the only way that we can pretty much put a solution is that the community can work together and they actually can find solutions by themselves. Very surprising for me working as a shelter manager that most of the time that I spent as a shelter manager, it was trying to resolve conflict between neighbors. How difficult was that in terms of reclaiming, number one, in terms of surrenders. And I was the witness of many conflicts that sometimes I was just asking myself, how important is that as an animal control agency, we need to start to design tools that actually are friendly for people who own cats. And more specifically about registration. During all my time, I never found the owner of a cat through registration, to be honest. And I found during my experience, the increase in the reclaim rate in cats is that most of them, they were microchipped, but because we didn't act very quick, those cats were not found. We didn't find the owners of those cats. So saying this, I think that's pretty much the main motivation to develop this idea. Very important as well, I identified that in terms of resources and tools in the community, we don't have a support in terms of information to understand the demographics and the dynamics of cats around the community. So very important, I think we really need the possibility to have a resource where we can identify what are the demographics of those pets in the suburbs. So if they are gonna be found just meters from home, we would like to know what are our cat neighborhood, what are the profiles of those cats, how those cats are behave. In North America, there is a very good platform that tries to engage communities, neighborhoods to try to help each other. If I need a letter, they can just find those resources through the networking of the neighborhood. So at the same time, just talking about the needs of information for those demographics, it's extremely important that we need to start to flip how registration is designed for local law governments, because most of the cat owners, they can't find the reason or the benefits to have the cat register. So I think in terms of local agency, it's extremely important that we try to provide to the communities an option that actually is designed based on that market, because actually the cat owners are our clients as well. So there are several studies, I'm not gonna go through this because it was excellent information from before, that it just tell us that the cats are just basically roaming around in the same neighborhood. And yes, we talk about many situations where people is not very happy having a cat wandering around, but let me tell you that there are a lot of people that actually enjoy those interactions. And at the same time, we have people who owns those community cats, and we cannot deny that. We need to allow the possibility of those cats to be reclaimed by multiple people. So extremely important about that. So what is cat passport? So cat passport could address a number of those issues that we have been discussing. Very important, we need to provide a tool that it will engage communication, cooperation, coordination within the community, within the neighborhood. That what I propose is that application is a free application where basically we can have the profile of those cats. We can know where those cats are located within our neighborhood. We can be advocates for cats that they are community owned. We can basically have a better understanding about how the neighborhood is designed. So for instance, if we are looking for a new house and we try to find what are the dynamics and demographics of those suburbs, and we know that is there is a high level of cats in that area, well, I think the message is that we may have to find another suburb if I don't enjoy the interaction with cats. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources when we are trying to rent, we are trying to buy a home. We know where are the shopping centers, where are the schools, and even what are the dynamics of the neighborhoods. But we don't have the possibility to have a platform that is gonna tell us what are the demographics and dynamics of the cats within the community. In terms of what we like to propose in here is to have a platform that will reduce the euthanasia in shelters for sure, that will minimize the cat trap for cats that they are owned by people, and making sure that we have the possibility of provide better service for cats that are owned and the pet owners within the community. So when I mentioned before, in terms of the demographics and in terms of technology, we used to have traps to trap the cat, take it to the shelter, and then the cycles go on. So what about if instead of trapping the cat, we trap the track? So what about if we, instead of putting that cat in a trap that is owned by someone that it can just live next door, we can have a system where basically it's gonna identify that that cat has been visiting a specific home. So what I'm trying to say here in terms of the general concept is we are talking about a problem that is traffic, and most of those issues that can be resolved basically identify where is the cat coming from. In terms of the system, what I'm trying to propose as an idea is that we have some specific electronic feeding systems that can identify the microchip of those individuals. And very important, they can send that information through a platform, and it's going to tell us that that cat has been visiting that specific home. That system can be linked into a specific type of registration. So for example, if my registration for one cat is $20, and every time that the cat is going to visit that feeder, it's going to be discounted 20 cents. So for a person that has a cat that is wandering around, the registration is going to be expired very soon. For a person that the cat never goes in, that means that that registration can pass to the next year. That's obviously just an idea. Very important, those feeders can also give us a very good information about the demographics of that area. And a cat owner can basically top up the account every time. So as I mentioned from the beginning, the idea is just to encourage all of us to make sure that we can find other solutions. And the two important points is about information, and the second thing is trying to flip the registration, because in most of the councils that I have been working with in terms of contracts and facility, we talk about all the time about enforcing law, but we never actually try to develop strategies that actually can provide the cat owners a peace of mind that at least we are thinking about them. Now, in terms of catch by tracking, is basically a platform that it can provide information, number one. Number two, that actually we are gonna track, we are gonna catch those tracks. And there could be multiple toll points for that community. And what is gonna happen then is that at least the person can have a better understanding about how important it is to keep the cat contained. And at the end of the day, the reality is that cats are gonna wander anyway. Very important, the person can also nominate multiple people that can reclaim that cat. And at the same time, we can try to promote a neighborhood watch about those cats. So previously we noticed how important it is to engage community to find those cats and try to promote the information about that cat that is wandering around. As I mentioned before, I have been very close with this technology in terms of how information can get from the feeders. Obviously, the cats are wandering because they are trying to find a source, and in this case, the cats go to get fed. The information can go into the platform, and they can be uploaded into the application that they can have access to the community, even the local agencies. Now, another important feature is that the cat passport, it can have a very important cat list for those cats that they are D6, microchip, and current register. I think it is important, and I found this situation in the councils that I have been, in the agencies that I have been working, that we, for some cats that they are doing the right thing, we should be promoting the extension of the stray period of time. So if a cat is D6, microchip, and register in his first offender, there is not a point to have a stray period of time of just 3 days. I think for people who is actually doing the right thing, they should be having the possibility to increase that stray period of time. So in general, I think the message is working in the private sector, it just gives me the opportunity to understand how important it is to start to sit together, trying to find different options. And this specific example was designed for the conference. I think there is a lot of talking, and just pretty much trying to put an idea outside to make sure that we are all compromised with innovation and different options for promoting own cats to be reclaimed. And very important because the population of cats owned by people is going to be increased because the population is going to increase. And we need to encourage the same community, the same neighborhood to know the cats, to know each other, to collaborate between neighbors, to make sure that we have and find different options and alternatives to reduce the number of cats coming into the shelters. So thank you very much.
Speakers from this morning's session up here for question time. And just while they're coming up, an announcement. Purina are selling stock at cost today, so if you need anything, any supplies, go grab them. And we are having morning tea, and our next session does start at 10:30, so I'm going to trust everyone to come back on time. And once we've had the questions, if anyone's happy to line up and ask their questions, we'll then have a couple of quiz questions, and I'll get our speakers to tell me who they think is answering them first. We are going to be asking our hardest question yet, so please turn your brains on. Yep, got a question?
Good morning. Oh, I'm pretty loud anyway. This question for you, Professor Jackie. I'm from City of Darwin. I'm from City of Darwin, and we. Everyone here's Is it on? Yeah. Yeah, I'm from the City of Darwin, and we trap cats. That's pretty much all we have. Your trap neuter release was very, very interesting, and I grabbed a lot of information from that. I was just wondering if, because community support, we're eons behind everyone else. With your trap neuter release, there seemed to be such a terrific community support with your feeding, medical, and whatnot. Would that trap neuter release, or has there any studies been done, work if you did that trap neuter release and walked away?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's what governments are often concerned about. Anya Dale from New Zealand did some research, and she looked at the welfare of cats in managed colonies and unmanaged colonies. And she showed that cats in managed colonies were not significantly different from pet cats. And that was based on visual scoring, including body condition, which tells you that they were overweight. Cats that were in unmanaged colonies were significantly leaner, but only 4% of them were emaciated compared to 2% of pet cats and cats in managed colonies. So yes, they were leaner, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, and statistically more were emaciated, but 4% is not biologically of concern. So we know they're out there. We know that that they have a carer, and you may not know, but if the important thing is if the cat's in good condition or reasonable condition, is not unhealthy, and studies from overseas and what's coming into shelters and pounds here, you know that most of them are doing just fine when they came in. They're in good body condition. Most of them are healthy. So just put them back because they've got someone who's feeding them, even though you can't identify them. So it's a great question. And although managed colonies, if there's a group of cats, then managing protects them better because you've got some, and I'm going to talk this afternoon about more about best practice, but if you've put the food down, what the respondents were doing was not necessarily best practice. It's best to put it down for 30 minutes. All the cats come, you can monitor them, see who's an immigrant cat and catch those, and you can also see who's sick and needs to be trapped and get treatment. I could keep raving, but I'll stop.
Thank you very much.
We've got another question.
I've got to fill the gap, right? This is for Bridget. One of the suggestions that we've made for finding cats is to go after dark with a torch because it'll shine in their eyes. Have you thought about that or know anything about that?
Absolutely, that is, and obviously we only have a little bit of time today to make the presentation, but there are many, many things that we recommend and our pet detectives recommend to pet owners, and they are often successful at finding their cats at night because cats are often nocturnal and are active at night. Plus, it's easy to find the eye shine. But the caution on that, like we talked about yesterday, is that if you're walking around with the flashlight at night, someone may harass you or call the police. So it is one of the techniques that we recommend to people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking for the eye shine is
Yeah.
because they'll look at you, but they won't speak to you.
Yeah, or they may be more visible during the day. Their bodies may just sort of blend in with the sunlight or whatever else they're doing. But at night, you can catch them by the light of the flashlight.
And in the unhelpful stories, how many actually ended up as a stew somewhere in the local Chinese takeaway? Is there any documented?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, another question?
Yeah, for Jackie. First of all, Jackie, thanks for doing the research. It's good to have some research in Australia now. Just any thoughts on the identification of cats in the TNR program, because you can't generally do ear tipping and so forth. So how did you know, how would the public know that there's a cat in a program that can't do a microchip scan?
And that's a good question. And I think overseas cats are ear tipped, and that's part of our recommendations for best practice. It's not a cosmetic feature, which, you know, some of the concerns raised by welfare agencies, you know, you're cutting the cat's ear. It's not cosmetic. It protects the cats. Then they're not re-trapped, and people know that they're in an official program. So absolutely.
And we've got another question here.
Hi, I'm not sure if you're already going to speak about this afternoon, but I just wanted to know if there's any studies done into the TNR program and the managed and non-managed colonies on our wildlife.
On wildlife. I'm going to speak quite a bit on wildlife. And my comment to, like, maths was never a really good, strong point of mine. And in that, if we talk about whole cats rather than point, so are 12 cats going to kill more or less wildlife than 7 cats? And given that the 7 cats are desexed and have got 30% less energy requirements than an entire cat that's not lactating or pregnant, so what's the effect on wildlife? So, less cats are going to kill less wildlife, but that cat may kill wildlife. And there's some interesting work. We're doing a study where we're asking people what they see their cat catch and their dog catch. Cats overwhelmingly catch mice, followed by rats, followed by small lizards, followed by common birds. So yes, it might kill a cat. And the Brisbane City Council, because they've got this feral cat program, and there's no one here from the Brisbane City Council, but they've got a target of 1,000 cats a year, and they thought that they would tell taxpayers how well their dollar was being spent. So they did stomach analysis on 25 of the cats. All they found was black rats. So, you know, of the wildlife. So, managed colonies or unmanaged colonies, the unmanaged colonies they're probably getting food from people, those, you know, sort of 1 in 15 to 20 people that are feeding cats that don't perceive they own them. And, you know, wildlife, they may catch some wildlife, but there's no study in urban Australia that shows that cats have a negative effect on the population of wildlife.